Good day, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. About 10 minutes, 5 minutes. This is Morsels of a Thought number 1748. I try to bring us thoughts of wisdom so that we learn the right things to do, because knowing the right things to do is a form of wisdom. And then actually taking the action to do it is virtue. We're bringing more virtue into the world with morsels of a thought of wisdom from other people, including editor, commentator William J. Bennett, and other authors in this very nice thick book that he's got here, the Book of Virtues. So we want to see what these wise people have to say. I'm going to start off with Dolly Madison Saves the National Pride by Dorothea Payne Madison. Interesting. In August 1814, a British army marched on Washington, D.C., thinking that by burning the American capital, it could bring an end to the War of 1812. Panic reigned in the city as the red-coated columns approached. Many public records, including the Declaration of Independence, had already been stuffed into linen bags and carted off to Virginia, where they were piled up in a vacant house. Now, the roads leading out of town began to fill with fleeing American soldiers and statesmen, as well as wagons loaded with families and their valuables. Dolley Madison, Dolley, wife of the fourth president, calmly directed evacuation details at the White House. A large portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart, Stuart, hung in the dining room. It would be an unbearable disgrace if it fell into British hands. Mrs. Madison ordered the doorkeeper and gardener to bring it along, but the huge frame was screwed so tightly to the wall that no one could get it down. Minutes ticked by as they tugged and pulled. At last, someone found an axe. They chopped the frame apart, removed the canvas, and sent it off for safekeeping. Soon afterward, safekeeping. Soon afterward, the British entered the District of Columbia, setting fire to the Capitol and the White House. The rescue of Washington's portrait quickly took its place as one of Americans' most cherished acts of heroism. This letter, written by Dolley to her sister Anna, even as the city fell, speaks to us of unflinching courage and level-headedness amid chaos and retreat. So that is the commentary by William J. Bennett on the story by Madison, by what's her name? Madeline. Dorothea Payne Madison. Dear sister, my husband left me yesterday morning to join General Winder. He inquired anxiously whether I had courage or firmness to remain in the president's house until his return on the morrow or succeeding day, and on my assurance that I had no fear but for him and the success of our army, he left, beseeching me to take care of myself and of the cabinet papers, public and private. I have since received 2 dispatches from him, written with a pencil. The last is alarming because he desires I should be ready at a moment's warning to enter my carriage and leave the city, that the enemy seemed stronger than had at first been reported. And it might happen that they would reach the city with the intention of destroying it. I am accordingly ready. I have pressed as many cabinet papers into trunks as to fill one carriage. Our private property must be sacrificed as it is impossible to procure wagons for its transportation. I am determined not to go myself until I see Mr. Madison safe, so that he can accompany me, as I hear of much hostility toward him. Disaffection stalks around us. My friends and acquaintances are all gone, even Colonel C. with his 100 who were stationed as a guard in this enclosure. French John, a faithful servant, with his usual activity and resolution, offers to spike the cannon at the gate and lay a train of powder which would blow up the British should they enter the house. To this last proposition I positively object, without being able to make him understand why all advantages in war may not be taken. Wednesday morning, 12 o'clock. Since sunrise, I have been turning my spyglass in every direction and watching with unwearied anxiety, hoping to discover the approach of my dear husband and his friends. But alas, I can descry only groups of military wandering in all directions, DESCRY, as if there was a lack of arms or of spirit to fight for their own fireside. 3 o'clock. Will you believe it, my sister? We have had a battle or skirmish near Bladensburg, and here I am still within sound of the cannon. Mr. Madison comes not. May God protect us. 2 messengers, covered with dust, come to bid me fly, but here I mean to wait for him. At this late hour a wagon has been procured, and I have had it filled with plate and the most valuable portable articles belonging to the house. Whether it will reach its destination, the quote, Bank of Maryland, end quote, or fall into the hands of British soldiery, events must determine. Our kind friend, Mr. Carroll, Carroll, has come to hasten my departure, and in a very bad humor with me, because I insist on waiting until the large picture of George Washington is secured, and it requires to be unscrewed from the wall. This process was found too tedious for these perilous moments. I have ordered the frame to be broken and the canvas taken out. It is done, and the precious portrait placed in the hands of 2 gentlemen of New York for safekeeping. And now, dear sister, I must leave this house, or the retreating army will make me a prisoner of it by filling up the road I am directed to take. When I shall again write to you, or where I shall be tomorrow, I cannot tell. Dolley, Dolley. Now that is a mark of courage. William Tell, retold by James Baldwin. Here's a commentary by William J. Bennett. This famous story of the legendary Swiss hero William Tell takes place in the early part of the 14th century during the Swiss people's struggle for independence from Austrian rule. It is one of our greatest tales of cool and calm bravery in the face of bullying tyranny. We are reading Morsels of a Thought of Wisdom. I am hoping that we learn what to do that is the right thing for us to do, because that's wisdom. And then actually taking the action to do it is virtue. We're bringing more virtue into the world, or at least chances of more virtue, with Morsels of a Thought. And here I am reading the story of William Tell, retold by James Baldwin. The people of Switzerland were not always free and happy as they are today. Many years ago, a proud tyrant whose name was Gessler ruled over them and made their lot a bitter one indeed. One day, this tyrant set up a tall pole in the public square and put his own cap on the top of it. And then he gave orders that every man who came into the town should bow down before it. But there was one man named William Tell who would not do this. He stood up straight with folded arms and laughed at the swinging cap. He would not bow down to Gessler himself. When Gessler heard of this, he was very angry. He was afraid that other men would disobey and that soon the whole country would rebel against him. So he made up his mind to punish the bold man. William Tell's home was among the mountains, and he was a famous hunter. No one in all the land could shoot with bow and arrow so well as he. Gessler Gessler knew this, and so he thought of a cruel plan to make the hunter's own skill bring him to grief. He ordered that Tell's little boy should be made to stand up in the public square with an apple on his head, and then he bade Tell shoot the apple with one of his arrows. Bade. Tell begged the tyrant not to have him make this test of his skill. What if the boy should move? What if the bowman's hand should tremble? What if the arrow should not carry true? Will you make me kill my boy? He said. Say no more, said Gessler. You must hit the apple with your one arrow. If you fail, my soldiers shall kill the boy before your eyes. Then, without another word, Tell fitted the arrow to his bow. He took aim and let it fly. The boy stood firm and still. He was not afraid, for he had all faith in his father's skill. The arrow whistled through the air. It struck the apple fairly in the center and carried it away. The people who saw it shouted with joy. As Tell was turning away from the place, an arrow which he had hidden under his coat dropped to the ground. Fellow, cried Gessler, what mean you with this second arrow? Tyrant, was Tell's proud answer. This arrow was for your heart if I had hurt my child. And there is an old story that not long after this, Tell did shoot the tyrant with one of his arrows, and thus he set his country free. Interesting. I never knew that part, that second part. Doors of Daring by Henry Van Dyke. Barriers are invitations to courage. That's the only commentary William J. Bennett says. This is a poem. With mountains that enclose the vale, with walls of granite steep and high, invite the fearless foot to scale their stairway toward the sky. The restless, deep, dividing sea that flows and foams from shore to shore calls to its sunburned chivalry. Push out, set sail, explore. The bars of life at which we fret, that seem to prison and control, are but the doors of daring set ajar before the soul. AJAR, one word. Say not too poor, but freely give. Sigh not too weak, but boldly try. You never can begin to live until you dare to die. That was by Henry Van Dyke. Crossing the Rubicon, adapted from James Baldwin. In Roman days, the Rubicon, a stream in north-central Italy, marked the boundary between Italy and Gaul, Gaul. By law, Roman magistrates could bring armies into Italy only by permission of the Senate. By marching his legions across the Rubicon in 49 BC, Julius Caesar committed himself to a showdown with Rome itself. There we are. So, James Baldwin. Rome was the most powerful city in the world. The Romans had conquered all the countries on the north side of the Mediterranean Sea and most of those on the south side. They also occupied the islands of the sea and all that part of Asia that now belongs to Turkey. Julius Caesar had become the hero of Rome. He had led a large army into Gaul, that part of Europe which today includes France, Belgium, and Switzerland, and turned it into a Roman province. He had crossed the Rhine and subdued a part of Germany. Caesar's army even went into Britain. a wild and remote country, to the Romans and established colonies there. I'm going to add something. My Latin teacher said that the Romans swam like rocks. Okay, so that's just an aside. For 9 years, Caesar and his army had served Rome loyally and well. But Caesar had many enemies at home, people who feared his ambition and envied his accomplishments, people who cringed every time they heard Caesar called a great hero. This is Morsels of a Thought of Wisdom, number 1748. We are reading Tales of Courage, Crossing the Rubicon by James Baldwin, all commentated by William J. Bennett in his anthology, The Book of Virtues. So, people who cringed every time they heard Caesar called a great hero. Many had envied his accomplishments. One of these persons was Pompey, Pompey is how they spell it here, who had long been it was Pompei in Rome because the letter Y came later, much later. I think it came from Chinese. One of these persons was Pompey, who had long been the most powerful man in Rome. Like Caesar, he was the commander of a great army, but his troops had done very little to win the applause of the people. Pompey saw that. Unless something occurred to prevent it, Caesar would in time be his master. He therefore began to lay plans to destroy him. In another year, the time of Caesar's service in Gaul would end. It was understood that he would then return home and be elected consul or ruler of the mighty Roman Republic. He would then be the most powerful man in the world. Pompey and other Western world, the Pompey and other enemies of Caesar were determined to prevent this. They induced the Roman Senate to send a command to Caesar to leave his army in Gaul and come at once to Rome. If you do not obey this command, said the Senate, you shall be considered an enemy to the Republic. Caesar knew what that meant. If he went to Rome alone, his enemies would make false accusations against him. They would try him for treason and keep him from being elected consul. He called the soldiers of his favorite legion together and told them about the plot that had been made for his ruin. The veterans who had followed him through so many perils and had helped him win so many victories declared they would not leave him. They would go with him to Rome and see that he received his due rewards. They would serve without pay and even share the expenses of the long march. The troops started toward Italy with flags flying. The soldiers were even more enthusiastic than Caesar himself. They climbed mountains, waded rivers, endured fatigue, faced all kinds of dangers for the sake of their leader. At last, they came to a little river called the Rubicon, Rubicon. It was the boundary line of Caesar's province of Gaul. On the other side lay Italy. Caesar paused a moment on the bank. He knew that to cross the stream would be to declare war against Pompey and the Roman Senate. It might involve all Rome in a fearful strife, the end of which no man could foresee. We could still go back, he told himself. Behind us lies safety. But once we cross the Rubicon into Italy, turning around is impossible. I must make the choice here. He did not hesitate long. He gave the word and rode boldly across the shallow stream. We have crossed the Rubicon, he cried as he reached the far shore. There is no turning back. The news was shouted along the roads and byways leading to Rome. Caesar had crossed the Rubicon. People from every town and village turned out to welcome the returning hero as he marched through the countryside. The closer he drew to Rome, the wilder people celebrated his arrival. Finally, Caesar and his army reached the gates of the city. No troops came out to challenge them, and there was no resistance when Caesar marched into the city itself. Pompey and his allies had fled. For more than 2,000 years, men and women facing daring decisions have thought of Caesar at the edge of the stream before they too crossed the Rubicon. Mhm. Very interesting. We have time for one more poem by Rudyard Kipling. Commentary says, brave men and women, as well as cowardly men and women, are not born that way. They become that way through their acts. Here are the acts that make us not just grow up, but grow up well. Rudyard Kipling says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. It's a poem. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, Knaves, or watched the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build 'em up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so on when there is nothing in you except the will, capital W, which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, not nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds' worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Capital M. That was If. That was titled If. If. Okay, so I hope that we have read everything that we were going to read today, because sometimes I fear when I have this book that I possibly haven't read everything in it in a story. So if there is an unfinished story somewhere, please tell me and I will continue it. So here we are, Words and Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you for coming. Good morning to Colleen Dracos, Gina Putov, John Clark, and Tim Krebs, and AC Rosita, and Listeners Cantar, and Thelma Pacheco, and Tabitha Hekba. Okay, I'll talk to you again later. Old Kinderhook.